On February 9, 2016, the online world finally arrived at Kane Gamble's front door. The address was not a secret bunker. It was an ordinary family home in Colville, England. Upstairs was the room from which a teenager had reached some of America's most senior officials. For 8 months, that bedroom and the institutions across the Atlantic had existed in the same story. But distance made every consequence feel smaller on one side of the screen. On the other side were not symbols. They were officials, employees, and families with ordinary lives. How did a 15-year-old bedroom become the center of an international investigation? The answer begins before the famous names, with a teenager spending long hours online. Kane Gamble was born in 1999 and lived in Colville, a former mining town in Leicestershire. He was 15 when the campaign described by the court began in June 2015. His equipment looked less remarkable than the targets he would eventually choose. Online, Gamble started a group calling itself Crackers with Attitude. The court described a group that worked together and encouraged each escalation. Gamble later said he wanted to draw attention to perceived injustices and wrongs. A political motive did not make the methods or their consequences harmless. The first famous name in the court's account was CIA Director John Brennan. In June 2015, Gamble and the group decided to target Brennan. There was no dark command center, only a bedroom and growing confidence. The court found that Gamble gained unauthorized access to accounts and information. Success became something to display to the group and to people watching online. Each public claim made the next target feel like a larger stage. Senior officials began to look like names on a list instead of people. In Washington, employees began responding to problems that had started in an English bedroom. One side needed a desk. The other needed teams, procedures, and damage control. The campaign expanded to accounts connected to Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson and his family. Private family life became part of the campaign, and the human cost widened. The conduct included harassment and disclosure, not merely access to systems. Calling it a teenage prank would erase the people forced to live inside it. Back in Colville, every successful escalation made the next one feel possible. The farther the campaign traveled, the less real its effects could seem from the bedroom. The court also described conduct involving FBI Deputy Director Mark Giuliano and an FBI portal. That does not mean a teenager controlled the entire FBI. Accounts connected to officials could lead toward systems used by many employees. The response required staff time, postponed work, and extensive damage control. The court recorded substantial reputational damage as confidence in systems was shaken. Meanwhile, the physical room in Colville remained almost completely ordinary. That contrast created a dangerous illusion, enormous effects without visible weight. Victims could begin to feel like interfaces rather than people with homes and families. The campaign moved through more accounts, more officials, and more private information. It continued for 8 months, from June 2015 until February 2016. Some accessed systems served employees far removed from the famous officials named in headlines. When security teams responded, other projects and ordinary work had to wait. From the bedroom, that recovery work was almost impossible to see. What remained visible online was attention, reaction, and proof of another success. Attention rewarded escalation, and escalation created more attention. For victims, changing an account did not erase fear, exposure, or disruption. For agencies, the incident remained in reports, delayed work, and damaged confidence. For a teenager, the campaign still happened in the room where ordinary life continued. Across the Atlantic and in Britain, investigators began turning scattered incidents into one pattern. Different victims, accounts, and systems began pointing back toward the same campaign. The group identity that created confidence also created connections investigators could follow. As attention grew, the distance between the bedroom and consequences began to collapse. By early February, investigators knew where the online campaign met the physical world. The arrest was brought forward at the request of the FBI. On February 9th, British cybercrime officers arrived at Gamble's home. The campaign that crossed an ocean ended with the opening of one front door. At the door, there was no online alias, only a teenager and his family home. The ordinary bedroom became a physical place investigators could photograph and search. The court later noted that Gamble cooperated in disclosing his passwords when arrested. After months of constant online activity, the room became quiet. The silence did not erase the disruption already experienced by victims and institutions. The case turned months of online actions into specific criminal counts. The court also had to consider that Gamble had been 15 to 16 during most offenses. Youth explained part of the story. It did not remove the seriousness of the harm. By sentencing in 2018, Gamble was 18 and standing in a Crown court. The court faced both the teenager who began the campaign and the adult before it. The defense described his age, development, motives, and obsession with online activity. The record also described harassment, private disclosures, and institutional damage. The courtroom did not need the myth of a teenage mastermind. It needed to weigh a long record of choices, effects, age, and responsibility. The judge imposed a 24-month detention and training order. The closing message was aimed beyond Gamble at anyone tempted by the same illusion. The case proved that a person in a bedroom could create consequences far beyond it. It also proved those consequences were never weightless just because they were remote. The easy story says a teenager embarrassed powerful institutions. The fuller story includes employees, families, investigations, and years of legal consequence. A screen can create distance. It cannot make the people behind it disappear. The bedroom remained small even when the consequences became international. Eventually, every action returned to the ordinary front door where the story began. When a screen makes power feel unreal, how long before it makes responsibility feel unreal too?